Welcome everybody. My name is Morten Thorning, and this is PANEURAMA. We are streaming from Campus Condorcet at the Paris 8, the university in Paris, France. And today we are going to talk about a focus area, or a topic in my focus area. My focus area is the creative industries, and today we are going to talk about a project we are doing, which is called animation, acting, drama. And first, a few practical things. There is a link down in the bottom of down below where you can give inputs to the focus area, the creative industries in general. If you have any topics that you want to suggest, or you want to leave notes and comments, you're very welcome to do that. And also here, in a moment, we will have a guest coming in. That's a little surprise. So I read by introducing him. But let me first dive a little into today's topic. So last year, 19 young animators, young professionals and students from all over Europe met in Denmark to explore on how to make realistic animated acting with humanoid characters. Together with supervising director Alexis Vanaroy from the French studio Fortiche, they worked on a scene from the TV series of Arcane, and the idea was to explore how do we bring more emotion and how do we make tensions and drama into the characters. And I think we should start today's streaming by watching the result of this. So let's see the result of their work.
I joined this workshop and I was like, yes, I feel like I am getting it.
The free, good quality education.
To meet other talents. This is an amazing opportunity for that.
By coming here, I now have a new strength.
This experience I never had.
I feel like improving. I learn new tools, new way of using my tools, the kind of animation I want to do.
I felt so connected with everybody.
This surpassed my expectations.
It's been really, really nice.
I'm so happy to be here. It was amazing. Best experience of the year, easily.
What we saw here was the reactions of the participants. Actually, we want to show you the film. So the film comes up here.
Why are we here?
You still don't understand.
What I don't understand is how you can work with them. We were here, we saw what they did. I grew up knowing I'm less than them, that my place is down there. I want Powder to have more than that, and I'm willing to fight for it.
So was I. I was angry, just like you. I led us across this bridge, thinking things could change. If I hadn't, your parents would still be alive. I know you want to hurt the Topsiders for what they've done to us. But who are you willing to lose? Milo? Clagger? Powder? Nobody wins in war, Vi.
What are we gonna do? The enforcers will come back.
I don't know. I'll figure it out.
So this was the film from last year that was done in the Innovation Lab, Animation, Acting, Drama. And before we continue, I would like to introduce my guest, Daniel Callaby. And Daniel, can you present yourself?
Absolutely.
You brought some rabbits.
I brought some rabbits.
Okay, great.
Just thought that would be a nice little addition. I'm Daniel Callaby. I've got approximately 15 years of professional experience in the animation industry as an animator and now more as a supervisor. I've worked on mainly feature films for the first 5 years, quite classical family-oriented feature films, then moved to high-quality series and have more recently done more cinematics for games and music videos. Mm-hmm. So it's been a bit of an evolution and trajectory throughout 15 years.
Yeah, and now you're based here in Paris.
I am based in Paris, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is the center of European animation.
It absolutely is the heart of culture and animation, sure. And I am also a former student of your university.
Oh, yeah, that was a nice time.
Yes.
Just to reflect a little bit of the film we saw here, what we saw here was complex dramatic acting, which is very different from we usually see in animation, where there's a lot of dancing and nice movements and fast motion.
Sure.
And mind you, if I say something that sounds like I'm not an animator, I am not an animator. So that's good. I have you here because you know what you're talking about.
Sometimes.
So the thing is, if we're going to talk about animation, especially keyframe animation, I think we're starting with the 12 principles of animation.
Sure, it's the backbone.
The backbone of animation. This is principles that everybody is learning either by themselves sitting in front of YouTube or what source they use, or when they are in animation schools. Everybody goes through the 12 principles. Why is that? How did they come about, and why is that?
I mean, it's a little bit like the laws of physics. If you don't know them, they still exist. And if you do a good piece of animation and somebody dissect it, you're going to find those 12 principles in it, whether you were trying to do them or not. The problem with them is maybe that when we're relying on them solely to create pieces of animation, then it becomes a formula. Mm. But you can't neglect them completely. Like, they are part of nature. They are part of motion. Like, they exist whether you like it or not.
So you could say that when Disney, I can't remember, it was before or after Snow White, but you were sitting there with, it was after?
Yeah.
Okay, you were sitting there with 200 artists, and they were all working a little different with their arts. So he thought, okay, we need to make a series of principles that makes everybody work the same way.
Yes.
And so everything moves the same way. If you remember Steamboat Willie,
yes,
which is one of the first Disney films, the thing, it's a very funny film to watch.
It's great,
but everything is kind of moving a little. What do you say? It doesn't have the elegance.
Sure.
And it doesn't feel like they are in our gravity. So I think that the 12 principles is about that. It's about how to make move so everybody can make the same kind of movement.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they did was they looked back on the things that worked and the things that were dynamic and appealing, and they tried to, dissect it and pull it apart and simply put it into words. Like, why is it that these shots all work from different people? It's because they have these things in common.
Yeah.
And so they put these principles into place, which gave a bit of a blueprint for new animators coming up. They had a starting point. That is why we teach them in school. It's not for you to rely on them later on. I mean, if you ask me what the 12 principles are right now, I would miss a couple probably. But it's not really the point of them. Like, it's a starting pad, and it's sort of a canvas for you to start on. But once you've become comfortable with acting and animation and physics, they kind of just become part of the DNA.
Yeah, so it's interesting that it's around 100 years ago they were invented. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah,
they will probably be celebrated at some point. And what you're saying is that because we have now watched animation for 100 years, where they have been basic principles, we all know them as nature laws.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so the problem of relying on them too much, and when I teach at Gobelin, for example, I try not to mention any of them.
Mhm.
And I try not to use animation principles when I'm talking. I just talk like I would talk to a person who doesn't know what animation is, because you should be able to explain the same principles,
Yeah.
without shorthands. The problem with having these rules and shorthands is that things become a bit the same, because you're just slapping principles on stuff that isn't working. So that's the weakness of having it.
Okay.
But I still use them. Like if I have a shot that's not working, I'll go through my rule book and go like, hey, maybe I should apply a little bit of rules into this.
Yeah. So these principles are about kinetics, gravity, and elegance.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain rules that isn't necessarily only in animation. Somebody like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin also use these rules of anticipation, like anticipating the audience before you do an action, these kind of things. It's more for clarity of the audience.
Okay, so now you're mentioning actors that is from the time of pantomime and silent movies.
Yeah.
So the principles also has something to do with pantomime, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe because it's an exaggerated form of visual storytelling, where the aim for it is clarity. It's just interesting that those same rules apply. But like silent movies, cinema has changed today, and so has animation.
Yeah. So the reason why we're sitting here talking about the 12 principles is actually that animation, acting, drama, the innovation lab that we have done, set out to say, okay, now the 12 principles of animation is 100 years old. Now we know them by heart. Maybe we should try to go in a direction where we figure out how to give real life to characters, to humanoid characters. It has been, for a long time, we have been struggling with putting life into humanoid characters without its, uncanny valley.
Sure.
It seems like, okay, we did everything right with this character, but she or he still seems a little dead. It's not coming to life in the same way as if we are applying them to a talking rabbit.
Sure.
So maybe these principles have created a lot of form, a lot of beauty, a lot of and a way of controlling the way everybody working and talking about how we should work.
Yeah.
But they are not necessarily very good at putting intention and life into characters. And let's just...
I absolutely agree, by the way.
And let's talk about that in a moment, but let's just see what the participants of the Innovation Lab last year, they are saying about this. They went out for a journey to explore what could be new principles of real dramatic acting with humanoid characters. And let's just hear their thoughts on that.
Since animation used to be exclusively on paper of 2D characters that really didn't exactly look like humans, but more so caricature of humans, we needed these 12 principles to instill life into something that didn't necessarily look alive. So to make Mickey Mouse believable, for instance, you need all of these exaggerations in the movement and so on and so what. It's not necessarily true, I think, for realistic 3D subtle acting. And I think Arcane Season 1 proved this. There's no doubt.
I think, of course, we still rely on the 12 principles of animation, for sure. But it is true that in particular, like realistic, dramatic acting of the human characters, there are certain principles that you use less and certain principles that you use more.
It really depends on the style, definitely. Some of them are not as relevant.
Principle from Disney is really focused on movements. It was on 2Ds. It was like, how can you make some overlap? How can you make some spacing? How can you make... It's all about how fast or how slow the character move on the screen. So I think if you want to go away from that, we need to stop looking as movements, but like how's feeling, how's acting.
I think they're called principles for a reason. They are very fundamental. for making any sort of animation believable. And to learn animation, I think you should learn them. But there are things on those principles that when doing more realistic sort of animation gets a bit not on the same page.
I think less is more is a good sentence to keep in mind, or a good rule.
You need to use them at 1% of what they can actually be.
It's not like we have to do an amazing silhouette, an amazing Persian squash and stretch. We are more in the key poses.
When you do more settles, you're making more intentional movement. Things like squash and stretch, maybe it's not about deformation of the character per se, but more about change of its pose, like change of the overall shape, but achieved not through literally like squashing it down, but just making him like more curled or something like that.
You don't really deform the character the same that you do in a Disney movie. Like the character can come completely like wobbly almost. And that's not done at all in this kind of show. Like that's really frowned upon, I think.
If we were to take all of the shots that we did, add squash and stretch and exaggerate everything, it would be a total mess.
Animation should be driven by intentions and not by flourish.
Nothing hits if there's not intention. And I've seen it while working. Maybe I can do a nice movement, I can do a nice moment, but if the characters has no intention, no reason, it's just pretty pixels doing a pretty thing. And it doesn't hit you. Why are you doing this particular thing? Is it needed? Does it add something? Or it's just something you want to do because you think it will look good?
It becomes about how specific you can be to show emotion. Specifically how they express like really small things instead of making it really big and theatrical. It's both about like in the movement, but also in the thought process.
Because I'm coming from a cartoony background, I'm used to looking at shapes a lot. So when I make my keys, I'm more looking for shape changes and shape dynamics and how the shapes are interacting with each other. We should look more at emotions rather than shapes, and movement rather than shapes. Every shape has an intention behind it.
It's so important that we not only create things that are just appealing, that work, but we apply culture, social rules, animation principles. That's a base. That's kind of like a instruction how to work with movement. But then what really matters to me is that we, on top of that, add cultural elements.
It's very important to also maybe rethink the concept of appeal, because one thing is appeal when everything is beautiful in a very standard way, you know, and another thing is appeal when something is harmonious within itself. Something has a logic to it. When there is any logic to something, I think our brain just immediately reacts to it as being real, because it makes sense within the thing. Even if the thing itself is not super pretty, we still like, yes, that's real, because it's true to itself. And I think that's probably what more realistic appeal is.
We have like the principle of making a pose, like a silhouette, where that's basically the concept of like making sure that the pose is readable. That can be a little bit exaggerated sometimes in the way that you need to move the hand away from the body. But that's super irrelevant in this kind of animation. Like you don't need to like make a silhouette readable. Everything can be in here if you needed to.
Yeah, let me just say that all of these small films that we are presenting, you can find on the skill base under the focus area creative industries. Let's move on into the discussion of this, because now I think we kind of taking one step up. The animator is actually an actor, but it is an actor that is having to function in a high-tech environment, in an industry where you are supposed to work together with many others who might work with the same character or the same scene, and therefore there's a high level of collaboration needed. So when it comes to making drama come alive and appearing realistic, what do you do in your work to make the inner life of a character being readable in a piece of animation?
I cry a lot. No, I mean it starts with having an idea, you know, that everybody's kind of on the same page. Like you need to discuss the character's sort of inner workings. Like I think personally for me, characters starts to become one-dimensional if all we're trying to do is convince the audience of what they're thinking and saying. In fact, the only person that should truly know what the character is thinking are the animators, but they should know it down to the millisecond. Like they should have complete access to what's going on in the inner workings of that character. And then that's what brings life, you know, like that's when you start to believe that that is a living, breathing human being with thoughts and emotions. And like you said, obviously there's going to be many animators working on the same character and the same scene. But I mean, we're dealing with professionals, and that's kind of what they're taught. You know, it's that's why we in every production you would be surprised that at the beginning that things starts to kind of go out in different directions, and then we sort of tie it in together. Like we start to figure out the characters we go a lot of the time. It's a process.
Is the technology in the way? I'm impressed with when I meet really skilled animators. I'm looking at engineers that have totally surpassed the machinery they're working with, and they're working with an intention from within.
That's the goal. You don't want to be inhibited by your tools. You know, you should feel comfortable with them. I mean, I would say I've seen animators of all sorts. You have very technical animators that do amazing work. You have very non-technical animators that seem cursed. Their computer will explode every time they touch it, but they have such an amazing, you know, idea. They're going to get it out anyway somehow, even if they're fighting with the technology. So I don't think there's one, you know, correct way of achieving.
How do you do if let's say that 5 people are working with the same character?
Sure.
How do you keep that character in character? So we're not dealing with 5 versions of the character.
Well, at the beginning, you are going to have 5 versions. I mean, I try to, when I delegate shots, I try to minimize how many animators are touching each character. Okay. I'd rather try and have 2 guys on this one, 2 guys on the other one, rather than everybody touching everything.
Yeah.
But let's say we have 5 people that need to work on one character. You are going to start with 5 different versions. And then you sort of take a little pause, you look at it, and you kind of say, okay, this one and this one, that's going in the right direction. You 3, look what those 2 are doing, and then we kind of lean it over that way.
Yeah. So, you know, when we talk about the real actors of bone and meat,
sure,
on the stage, and I mean, if we're going to produce drama which has the same quality as you see in live action TV series and on the theater sets, where the way an actor can embody a character so the charisma of that character is shining over the first 4 or 5 rows of the theater room without even saying anything.
Sure.
That is a powerful performance.
Yes.
How do we get 2, 3 animators working with that character to be able to do the same thing?
I mean, I've seen that happen, you know, like I've seen strong animated characters that, you know, completely affect you emotionally as much as any live action actor. It is possible. Like you said, though, I mean, it's harder, but we do have an advantage that actors don't have. We can redo. You know,
yeah, okay.
So we can make mistakes, you know, more than an actor is really allowed to. We can go back in and tweak weeks after the performance and go like, this moment is a little bit weak, or, you know, like we can review and tweak everything as we go. So that is an advantage that we have. But you're right. I mean, the organizational part to make it seem like one coherent personality is not easy to achieve, for sure.
No. And when we look back at the last 100 years of animation, where it moved from being isolated business for the few, and an art form for the many, and today we're looking at what can be described as a big industry.
Absolutely.
And this big industry is filling our hearts and minds with a lot of stories. And sometimes when I watch all of this, I just see well, a lot of a lot of noise. Sure. Which there's a lot of movement and a lot of fast editing and a lot of loud music that takes away my attention. Instead of serving me some message with the real purpose of me as a human being.
Sure.
And so what we are talking about here is not just bringing in the acting as a more important thing, is also to say, hey, now we have 100 years of animation. What about taking a breath and saying, what are we really going to use this medium for?
Yeah, I agree. But I think we're in an interesting time where we are seeing more diverse films and projects of animation emerge, especially from Europe at the moment, in the US as well, but from the West, where it has been very classical up until this point, and we are starting to see a change, a pivot, which is interesting. And that's also why we're having this conversation. How do we? I think the audience is more ready, now than they've ever been, to accept more subtlety in animation, to accept more real subjects, more real feelings, to not just have it be a distraction, as you kind of allude to, that it's just popcorn, something with real substance. I mean, the film Flow, which was a good movie by any standard, not just for animation, it's just a good movie.
Brilliant movie.
Yes, but it did show that we can talk about different subjects than all of the big blockbuster movies, and I think we are ready to sort of advance that agenda.
Let's see what the participants discovered. They will share their thoughts on acting and drama as they experienced them during the last year's Innovation Lab.
I think the times where people were wanting to see things moving and stuff is gone. Now people want to see characters act in a way that they feel like they can relate to, and that feels really natural.
There are two kinds of animator, the more cartoony one and the more realistic one.
We're taught very cartoony, and we're taught very pantomime, all over the place emotions. But that's not how people usually act.
Between cartoon animation and realistic animation comes first and foremost from what you want to tell, what you want to show, who you want to please.
Treating more the audience as not stupid or ignorant, treating them as smart beings as they are, and really being able to be subtle and not too obvious about what you're trying to say. With the storytelling, with the acting, with the expressions, with everything.
It's not so much overacted. It's not so much gimmicking. You don't point at so many things. You really try to act as authentic as possible.
We're not just following some stereotypes about particular characters, but we're just trying to figure out who they are as an individual.
For me, it was always difficult to use my reference and then translated it to the 3D character, because a lot of things get lost when you're working on the 3D part, because you think so much about technical stuff that sometimes you forget the acting part, and then your animation doesn't look as good as you reference, or it doesn't look as you wanted it to look.
Learning to study more live action, I think, could be really good. Analyzing more human emotions rather than cartoony emotions could really benefit a lot of animators who want to get into stuff like fetish, right?
Acting is anticipating. It's so simple, but it works so well. And there's a documentary about Bill Clinton, I think it was, right? How when he made speeches, the gesture emphasis came before he would say the thing. And that's key. Really, if you have the movement accents together with the speech that they're supposed to emphasize, it feels like the character is lying because they have to think about the gesture. A really good way to get naturalistic acting is putting the accent way before, like maybe 12 frames before, depends on the case.
It's like trying to really create this illusion that what you're seeing is not an animation work, but like a real actor, a real human being in front of you with like what he's trying to tell you, but what he's actually really trying to convey inside of him. And seeing that in his eyes, seeing that in his breathing cycles.
I think less is more is a good sentence to keep in mind, or a good rule. And honesty. Find the honesty and the core emotion of a shot. I think those two would be something to always keep in mind.
Try to follow the reference, try and follow the reality as much as possible, trying to not stray away too much from what we are experiencing as human beings, as people.
I think when you do realistic acting, you should think a lot more about it. Not just follow the graphic part of it, but follow the emotional part of it. Like, think, why are you making those choices? Is this the most obvious one? And if so, like, should you follow it, or should you look for something else? Because in real life, it's way more subtle. And when we're looking in the reference for those subtle changes in complex feelings that we're feeling all the time, because we're not feeling very simple things in real life, when we're looking for that, we can find something like very interesting and very rich in these details, in this like subtle little gestures, little eye movements that can create thought behind the character.
You have to be careful not to make it fake. You have to really use your past experiences, or you have to have this deep empathy to the story that you're presented with. And then when you know what movement has to happen in a scene, and you have the right emotion, then you have your reference. And then you try to recreate it as much as possible to get that intention in your work. And when you are really sure that everything is working and you have that intention, then that's the part when you can put your own artistic vision.
So real life is way more subtle than fictional characters, and animated characters are today, we are not really able to make them, let's say, containers of emotions and establish empathy with the audience in a way so they become more than just caricatures. And this is what this project, Animation Acting Drama, is actually trying to explore, if that's possible. But before we go into this more and elaborate a little on this, I think we should talk a little about workflow. So workflow, I mean, you're out there, you're working in studios, you are establishing workflows, and you're always in that situation under an economical pressure. Sure. So there will be things beyond your reach that has established a situation where you step in and you have to make a creation.
I would say most things are outside my reach. Most things are out of my control.
So what is how do you create a good workflow in such a situation?
I mean, you kind of brought it up that it depends on the resources that you have available, and I don't necessarily use the same workflow for everything that I do. Not even for my own shots, to be honest. Like it kind of depends on what is the most logical approach to one shot versus another, or one production versus another. I mean, it comes down to, if I have to give the most direct answer to a good workflow, I would say it comes down to talent. Like, you put the right people in the right place, and that's how you get good results. There's obviously, like you alluded to, some very technical obstacles. We have multiple interdepartmental problems, especially when you're dealing with mixed media or new technology that has to be integrated into old workflows. Like, my job generally is to try and take out those technical hurdles for good artists to be able to do their jobs.
Yeah. You talked before about there's a technical component and there's a creative component when you plan a workflow.
Yeah, so I mean, that whole interdepartmental problem that I was mentioning, like, in animation, we have a pre-production, storyboarding, design. We move it into a technical department called rigging. Then the animation department is sort of smack in the middle of it. That then goes to lighting and effects. And all of these departments have to be able to talk together. And if one line breaks, what you get at the end is not pretty. So that is a workflow. I mean, an animation is one part of it, but I would say that my role in it is for the animators to not feel anything outside of that department. They should just feel free to work without any constraints from any of the bigger machinery. Because, an animator is only really good if they can, like you said, they're actors. They have to sit and live and embody that character, and that takes enough effort. If they're also having to deal with technical problems and something that's not working, or surprises from other departments, now they become technicians, and that's not what we want. We want them to be creative and focused.
Yeah, it's when we use the term generalist and specialist,
sure,
which also has to do with where are people placed in a workflow. And you said before, creating the right workflow is finding the right people to do the jobs that has to be done.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by that?
I mean, I'm lucky that I've worked with so many talented animators, and I don't want to mention specific names, but I mean, there's one that's very good at making characters cry. So if I have a project where somebody's crying, I'm gonna give her a call.
Yeah.
And it's that's kind of what I mean. I know she's gonna do a better crying shot than most other animators. That's what I mean about putting the right people in the right place, and that's knowing your artists.
So you're calling the actor that is good at crying.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I mean, she's pretty annoyed with me because I only call her when I want somebody crying, but
okay. But you also said that, bad planning can destroy creativity.
Oh, for sure. Oh my God, yes. Most productions are not well planned. Well, I mean, it's part of it, like you roll with the punches and it's fine, and most of them still survive, they usually do. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have any foresight, if you suddenly hire a bunch of animators without an idea of the characterization of the character that they're supposed to be doing, and you have nothing to not influence them, inspire them with, if you haven't given it any thought in advance, everybody's just going to run around like headless chickens. That's bad planning. Now you've just wasted a week of a whole animation department's time, which are expensive people. So yeah, don't do that.
Okay. And you also used the term bad ideas can destroy creativity. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but there is, like we were talking about earlier, that you sometimes with mainstream animation, you feel like you've seen it before. It's a reused idea. And for me, there's honestly nothing sadder than seeing amazingly talented animators being forced to execute pretty creatively bankrupt ideas that we've seen a million times before. that does happen a lot. But again, I'm not on the money side of things. I understand that there's a lot of financial risk in doing animation, and people like to play it safe. I get it.
So that's maybe just one last thing to say before we see the film about workflow, which is that animators that are on the scene of a studio, sitting there thinking, why am I doing what I'm doing? Also has to consider how the studio actually is able to pay salary and create a long-term commitment to you as an artist. That requires that they will take in different jobs that might not 100% appeal to you as an artist.
Absolutely.
But they can pay salary.
So, I mean, I at the moment I'm supervising at a great studio. I really like them, Brunch. But on the side, I also, freelance on some other smaller creative projects. So those projects are mainly music videos or commercials. You can guess which one is paid and which one doesn't make me any money. But it has to be a mix. That's all right. So you have to agree with this. You have to find your own limit of how much balance you want to be able to have. Like of you putting your creativity in there and having complete freedom has a cost on the other hand. Like I'm comfortable with this balance, but it's an individual choice.
Okay. So let's all the participants of Animation Acting Drama last year, they were also, of course, discussing and reflecting on the workflow of creating great drama with animation.
I would actually just say from the film that we just saw, which is, there's one thing I very highly agree with, which is if I just have one rule, it is sincerity. Like if you believe it, other people will too. Like it pretty much just boils down to that.
Good point.
I think the strength of this workshop really was the teaching of a reliable workflow. Alexis has worked in a variety of styles. He worked for DreamWorks, he worked for Tish now, and he did projects that are cartoony, he worked on Kung Fu Panda. So he has experience in all of this, and still he uses the same workflow with small adaptations for each style.
Animation should be driven by intentions and not by flourish. They should definitely think about reference a lot. The first days when we did a lot of references was really cool because it allowed them to develop their acting skills. We didn't have much time, so I helped them because for some of them it was really hard. They didn't know how to do that. They never really experienced that. It's something that you have to experience through years and years and years of training. I think at the end when all the references were done and were compiled together in this, everybody felt like really like a feeling of achievement, and that was cool.
In a lot of companies, I feel like they want to create big silhouettes to actually be very fast at showing this emotion, while here what I'm learning is actually try to follow the reference, try and follow the reality as much as possible. Keep this idea of making more beautiful, making more clear, but at the same time trying to not stray away too much from what we are experiencing as human beings, as people.
When recording a reference, the idea of not overdoing it, not overacting it, just acting it normally, just as you would do if it was a live action movie. And then with animation, bring life to it. I think that's also really important.
Not everything that I learn here is new to me, but it's one way of thinking, one way of doing the things, the Fortish and the Arcane way of doing.
The workflow Alexi is sharing right now is totally new to me. I had the habitude to not be like organized from the beginning to the end. He gave us a workflow which encouraged us to be organized.
With Alexi, we come back to a workflow more realistic. It's really interesting, and I think it's more the kind of animation I want to do. We can push the emotion without big pauses.
The acting thing, I wasn't aware. Other animation styles, you're gesturing a lot and it's actually not necessary. It's a style, of course. I was acting out my shot. Then Alexis came to help me and he acted it out too. And by watching him acting, kind of make click in my head.
And I tried to record another reference, and it felt much better because I was just more focusing on being authentic.
The most important part of the Panorama workshop is to understand how to just work with a new workflow, and the workflow works for everything, because sometimes you just want to animate and it's not the right way because you lost yourself in the process. You need to follow steps, and if you do that correctly, the animation will be super cool.
Showing the students a lot of different examples of workflows and a lot of different examples of this is how to do it in the industry, this is things you can try for fun, kind of grounds people in a way and makes them a little more ready to come with suggestions, to have enough knowledge to trust yourself in being an important part of moving forward. Because that's also a thing when you become a junior. You might have good intentions and good ideas, but if you don't have that frame of reference for what's normal and stuff, you're not gonna suggest them.
As an animator, it's always adapting to the shot, adapting to the show, and adapting to what the production is asking.
And I think animation has different paths. You can have very cartoony, and if you go with my types of workflow and a very cartoony, like I taught them for 2 weeks, it's not going to work. But I always mention that this is the way for what we do right now. It's not the way for each time.
I think it depends on the animation director, what he wants to do, what's the show.
Everybody has another workflow, because animation is not just you can do it after a recipe. Everybody does it differently, and yeah, you can learn a lot from each other.
The Innovation Lab was very good for me to really think of what my approach to animation is and how does it differ from other approaches, and what would I like to improve in it, what would I like to keep in it, why do I have it. It's always great to work on something together with people, because that makes you think about things that you wouldn't have thought yourself.
Yeah, very interesting. And remember, you can always go back and watch these films one by one, and if there's anything you really want to hear, what did they actually say? Now we are kind of going to watch the conclusion of this little streaming here, and now we're going to talk about the content of this year's Animation Acting Drama Innovation Lab, which is going to be run by you, Daniel, and that's why you're here.
Yes.
So thank you.
No, it's my pleasure.
And we're going to do it again, but with slightly more focus on researching, on exploring, and on formulating. And the idea is that we will actually have the participant formulate a credo with a number of principles that what creates good drama and how we get intention behind the characters.
Yeah.
And to do that, we would try to formulate principles. And I can just because we did that.
We try to.
Yes. So we have cheated a little bit. We have already formulated a credo. And why we formulated that credo, it kind of came up to me that, it dawned on me that, well, anybody who's directing should formulate such a credo, not necessarily the one we have formulated, but a credo that makes it possible to create, coherent,
absolutely,
acting. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, you said it perfectly. I think on every production, it's a little bit like parameters or norms, for everything. And there's no real wrong answers. Like I've done everything from extremely cartoony to hyperrealism. I don't have a preference, to be honest, in style. I like all of them. I find interesting things in any style. But if you don't decide your style before and you don't know why the style is the way it is, then you get to that inconsistency.
Yeah.
So for example, like, I mean, well, on Fortress, we actually did do a credo before we started.
Yeah.
We did some testing before, but it was pretty simple. It was real world physics with graphical shapes, right? So that's why people feel heavier, but it also looks quite designed, you know, so it's that kind of mixture. And that's not the only way of doing it. You could do it the inverse way, where we're saying we're going to cheat all of the physics and we don't actually want any graphical shapes. Like, we want it to feel.
But now you're still talking about kinetics and gravity.
Sure.
Real world physics with, what do you say, graphic shapes.
But real world physics does affect acting as well, because it adds gravity. If somebody stumbles, it looks like they get hurt. You know, it builds into everything. Like, if somebody's placing down a water cup, they're not going to do it in a cartoon way. Things can fall over. It makes the whole world feel like that it can affect them.
Yeah.
And so that is important also for the acting and for the feeling of reality that you're getting.
So let me just take one of the principles from
from last year.
Actually from the year before.
Yes.
So we're trying to formulate a credo, and when you do that, you search, and let me just say that any director who formulates a number of principles that is going to be the foundation of the movements that is creating the character from when we see the movement, is of course the director. That's the way you shape a language, but also you shape how you communicate with the people. Yeah, we talked about before. You have five animators doing the same character. You need to talk to them with words that we have agreed on.
Absolutely.
So here's one. The acting style should not spoon-feed the audience with answers.
Sure.
And there's an underline. It says the character is a mystery being unraveled. Let the mystery live as long as you can. The acting is not here to hold you by the hand, just like in real life.
Sure, I would agree with that guy.
But this is yours.
Oh yeah, oh that's fine. Okay. No, but it's true. I mean, I feel like that what we're doing, which we would call maybe slapstick, that is spoon feeding you the answer immediately. You have a setup in a scene. Next scene, you have a conclusion to it. It's to keep the audience sort of engaged, but I think that there's other ways of doing engagement. You don't have to. You can create, you know, unknowns. Long pieces of unknown uncertainty of where this is going, and still keep people captivated,
just like in real life.
Just like in real life, like because yeah, that's how, like, you don't really know what everybody's thinking or what they're going to be doing next time, and not everything is wrapped up nicely every, you know, couple of minutes.
Yeah,
like life would be very easy if it was.
So if we're going to, now this becomes a little weird what I'm saying here, but
sure.
If we look at a lot of the animation that has been done, kind of humanity imagining parallel universes where things are happening very different.
Sure.
And we are talking about now, how do we actually bring the art of animation to portray what real humans are?
It's a deep question, huh?
Yeah. Is it possible?
I mean, well, in a sense, I mean, yeah, because it's an expression. I mean, it's like any art form. The person who's holding the brush, or in this case, you know, creating the animation, if they manage to communicate their inner feelings through this medium to somebody else, I would say they've succeeded. It's if that makes sense. I mean, the credo or the idea is just to give a less of a technical to-do list. Like, that is the animation principles, and that's good for technicians. And we are, I mean, I consider myself a craftsman before being an artist.
An engineer.
I don't know about that. I think engineers are kind of smart people.
Okay.
But I mean, to give an example, like, so I've been working quite a lot with live action directors recently in the last couple of years, and they have a completely different way of talking about animation, because they have no idea what the principles are in general, right? And on my last project, the guy talked a lot about how a real camera works and how a Steadicam works. And because I was moving it too much like an animated camera, I was like, no, it actually can't do that. And now it would actually, he would have to be in the wall and these kind of things, which made me rethink how, you know, camera motion actually works. And I can see the difference. You know, that one looks like a real live action camera, And in other projects, they don't, because they're not abiding by the same rules. Even something very small, that on a Steadicam, you have a small motor, a gyro that's holding it in place, but it's not perfect, which means there's a tiny little wobble on it. And once you add that in, it feels more real. So it's small little things, but yeah.
Okay. I think I would like to end up today's streaming and hope that you found it interesting. Please, there is a link down below where you can give inputs to the focus area, the creative industries. You can comment on what you just have heard today. You can suggest new topics. You can leave notes for us and the whole group of people behind this to read, to see what would be interesting for you to see and hear about. And then I'm just looking forward to be here in Paris. It's going to happen in August here at Campus Condorcet.
Yes.
We will be 20 to 22, 23 participants.
Something approximately like that. And I think we should also just mention that this year we are trying to develop some original content, where we have been, we've been working with screenwriters, and we will be doing original voice recordings. So hopefully this year students can really make something of their own.
Yeah,
which I think is wonderful.
Great. Thank you a lot for watching.
Thank you.
And thank you to you in Germany for making this whole thing possible on the online skill base from Filmakademie Baden-Württemberg.